In a small town nestled among dense forests, there lay a lake that locals avoided after dark. Rumors had always surrounded it, stories whispered among the older generation and passed down like warnings. It was said that strange things happened near the water, that shadows moved where there should be none. Most people dismissed it as folklore, old wives' tales meant to keep children from wandering too far. But then, children began to vanish. The first to disappear were two girls, Alina and Masha. It happened on a late autumn evening. They had gone to the lake on a dare, laughing, teasing each other about the supposed curse. But when night fell, they never came home. Their parents called the police, and soon search parties combed the woods and scoured the shores. Days turned into weeks, and not a single trace of the girls was found. A month later, the lake gave up its secret. A fisherman, casting his net one early morning, pulled up something tangled in the dark algae. At first, he thought it was debris, perhaps old clothes caught in the weeds, but as he dragged it onto his boat, his breath caught in his throat. A girl's pale face emerged from the water, her lifeless eyes staring at the sky. It was Alina. The town was thrown into chaos. The police sealed off the lake, and an autopsy was conducted. The results were disturbing. Alina had only been dead for about 5 days. Where had she been all this time? And worse, how had she survived for so long before the lake finally took her? She had been submerged, the coroner said, frowning over the report. But there are no signs of drowning. It's almost as if she was kept somewhere, waiting. The townspeople grew fearful. If Alina had been alive all that time, what about Masha? Could she still be out there, trapped in some unknown horror? More search teams were deployed, but they found nothing. A week passed. Then the second girl appeared, but not in the water. One early morning, the town's baker, heading to open his shop, stumbled upon a sight that made his blood run cold. There, in the middle of the main street, stood a girl, motionless, silent. It was Masha. Her clothes were drenched, her skin pale and pruned from prolonged exposure to water. She did not blink, did not move. Her lips trembled, but no sound escaped her mouth. The police were called immediately. As they approached her, something was deeply unsettling. Her eyes, they were not her own. They were completely black, as if the pupils had swallowed everything. When an officer reached out to touch her shoulder, she finally moved. Her head tilted upward, and a whisper escaped her lips, barely audible. "It's still in the lake." She collapsed. Masha was taken to the hospital, but she never woke up again. Doctors couldn't explain her condition. She was alive, breathing, but unresponsive, trapped in some unexplainable coma. The town was left with more questions than answers. Then, one night, a detective assigned to the case decided to return to the lake. It was foolish, he knew, going alone, but something about this whole case gnawed at him. As he stood at the water's edge, the air was still. Too still. Even the insects had fallen silent. He shone his flashlight across the surface, the beam cutting through the fog rolling off the water. That's when he heard it. A faint, drawn-out sob. It came from the other side of the lake. The detective's heart pounded. He knew no one was supposed to be here, but the sound was unmistakable. A child's cry. Slowly he stepped closer to the shore, peering into the mist. His flashlight flickered, and for a split second he thought he saw movement. 3 figures standing on the wet sand. Then they stepped forward. The girls, Alina, Masha, and another. A third girl, one that had never been reported missing, yet her face seemed eerily familiar. Their eyes were hollow, their lips slightly parted as if struggling to speak. They lifted their arms, pointing toward the water, their bodies trembling from the cold. The detective felt his legs freeze in place. The lake behind them rippled unnaturally, though there was no wind. Something dark shifted beneath the surface, moving toward him. His breath hitched. His mind screamed at him to run, but he couldn't move. The shadows in the water took shape, elongating, stretching toward the shore. A hand, long, thin, too many fingers, broke the surface, reaching, grasping. Then the girls whispered in unison, their voices layered, distant, echoing like the wind itself. "You shouldn't have come here." The detective staggered back, breaking free from whatever invisible force held him. He turned and ran, the cries of the girls chasing after him, growing louder, distorted. By the time he reached his car, the lake was silent once more. When he looked back, there was nothing, just the dark, still water reflecting the moonlight. The next morning, the detective quit his job and left town without a word. No one ever saw him again. And the lake? It remains. Quiet, waiting. The missing never returned the same.